like medicine, IP has become so subspecialized that when you say, well, just hire an IP attorney, that's like saying just get a doctor. But if you have a disease that affects 200 people in the world, you just can't get a doctor.
Yeah.
You got to get somebody that treats 200 people in the world, like Anthony, that treats God knows what. So the point is that if you just want to put together sort of a boilerplate IP protection agreement in an advisory service agreement, that's one thing. But if you're talking about this in the weeds AI in radiology, et cetera, you really need to find a person who is that subspecialized, because it changes every day. And you need to figure, you need somebody who's going to keep their finger on the pulse of this. And the other problem or issue is, well, I'm going to file, if it's a patent, which in this case we're talking about copyright, but if it's a patent, I'm just going to file a provisional patent. Now, a provisional patent, as we indicated in the first segment, is kind of like a placeholder. It starts the clock. Used to be first to discover. That changed in an intellectual property revision in 2003. So now it's first to file. So you file, like we said, and you're going to keep so it's a timekeeper. It's like, okay, you got a year to file the non-provisional patent. But like in most tech transfer operations or university innovation centers or whatever, you can pretty much do that for a couple $100. Filing a non-provisional patent costs a lot of money. It's probably going to cost about $5,000 or $6,000 minimum, assuming you're not going to go international, and God knows what that winds up to be. So the real issue, and maybe Lawrence, you can answer this, is if you're going to file a patent, now let's talk about a medical device or something where it's either a utility or a design patent. Should you file a non-provisional patent yourself? Is that a good idea? I mean, a provisional patent, not a non-provisional.
If you can file it yourself, however, you have to understand that it might not be able to use as a quote if it's too far to relate to the full patent that's going to be filed. It becomes, it's like, okay, this guy's my next door neighbor, not my family member.
Yeah. The general advice I hear from most people is, if you think it's going to be cheaper doing it yourself, I mean, if you think it's going to be expensive hiring a pro, wait do you see what it costs when you do it yourself? And basically, it's a bad idea. So if you're thinking of filing a provisional patent, you probably should bite the bullet and get a lawyer to do it, particularly someone that understands. That's the bottom line. Okay. Moving on. So now let's move on to the IP audit process. And you're not a lawyer, correct?
Correct.
And you're not a patent agent, correct?
Correct.
So there's lots of players in the patent world: patent agents, legal assistants, patent lawyers, people who do intellectual property services like yourself. So who do you hire? If I want to do an IP audit, whether I'm a startup or a scale up, then who do I get? Why would I hire you versus a lawyer or a patent agent or somebody else?
Well, the IP audit, for a starter, can be hired by myself, people like me. Patent agents are not the best people there because effectively they're trained to write patents. If they do searches, they don't usually do those themselves. Patent agent will purely just write up the paperwork. However, you
And
have
just
to remember,
to stop one, yeah, just to stop 1 second so people know, what's the difference between an intellectual property attorney and a patent agent?
a patent agent and an intellectual property attorney can both write up the paperwork. The patent agent is not licensed to go to court. Only the IP attorney is.
And most patent agents, therefore, work in general, intellectual property law firms, typically under the supervision of an intellectual property lawyer or law firm, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I've seen some independent ones. I've spoken to them, but very, very few and far between. They sit under the IP attorney umbrella.
Right. And again, just to fill out the dramatis personae, that's different than a patent agent. A patent agent is someone who works for the USPTO and sits on the other side of the table when you submit your patent. They basically examine your patent to determine whether it's patentable, correct?
No, it isn't actually, because basically the people who review the applications are patent examiners. Now, sometimes they are patent agents, and if they have a speciality, a niche that they can review the paperwork on, that's great.
Right.
My understanding is that they're typically engineers, all the different types of engineers that understand the nuts and bolts of how things go together.
Yeah, I think maybe I didn't make myself clear. So yeah, patent examiners work for the USPTO or some other patenting agency around the world.
Yes.
Whereas a patent agent typically works for a law firm or an IP law firm.
That's
to
correct.
Submit the patent. So they're on both sides, either side of the table. Okay.
Yes.
And incidentally, these different roles are things that physicians are pursuing as non-clinical careers. So this is another topic of conversation, but if for the audience, if you happen to be interested in intellectual property law and you're a doctor, we're seeing more and more doctors going to law school because of their domain expertise, whether they're data scientists and a doctor or instead of, they're going to law school, or you don't have to go to law school to be a patent agent. You have to go to patent agent certification courses.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a lawyer to be a patent examiner, although lots of them are, particularly in these deep domain expertise areas. So the point is there's lots of different ways to skin the cat if you're interested in doing this stuff.